Hello and welcome, Inklings, to all new first issues. I'm the Archivist, and these are the pulls from the week of May 4th, 2016. Yes, it's Star Wars Day, but the only thing that released relating to that is just an odd assortment of Star Wars covers bundled under the True Believers line, but I'll get to that. Also, in about 2 weeks or so, I'll be on the Badly Productions website proper, with first issues being available via their website. What does that mean? Only the future can foretell, and only the shadow knows. Also, I'm currently fighting off a cold, or depending when I'm actually recording this, in the middle of a cold. Either way, I'm hopped up on cold meds to not sound like total doom. Sorry if I do, and sorry if my editing sucks worse than usual. But we've got probably the most comics I've done so far, so no time to gab about anything else. Of course, we start off with the Great Mouse Empire and Marvel's The Punisher #1, volume whatever, it came out in 2016. Written by Becky Cloonan, art by Steve Dillon, and colors by Frank Martin. Well, it was inevitable, since Daredevil Season 2 made Punisher a hit character again, they put out a book for him. And that's what this is. It's a reintroduction of Punisher into the Marvel proper, with the Punisher acting as a silent badass. Of course, that does mean that we get a few exposition dumps about him from a guy who looks more like he should be Frank Castle than the actual art for Frank Castle. This isn't a bad read, but it's not really a good read. It's literally middle of the road. Now when it comes to the Punisher, or really any gun-toting vigilante, there's an aesthetic that works for it. And for a first issue, Cloonan tries to merge two story starters together, which actually makes Frank feel very bland and disconnected from the actual story. You've got the cops who are investigating for that big bust angle, but then you also follow Olaf, Frank's old CO, who gets to be our exposition to and about Frank when he busts in. Inherently, it's not bad that Frank doesn't talk, but at the same time we don't get any character from him at all. Also, didn't he outgrow the t-shirt look? But here's actually a great example about why I say the ANAD universe is a reboot, because you have a fresh Punisher, who they're going to build some extra mystery around, and that's just especially with the very inconsistent art and colors. That's really what let this down for me. There's some good art here in both pencils and colors. There's also a good chunk of time where you can see rushed work, such as where sometimes guns are detailed while other times they're extremely cartoony looking, or with the colors, there's times where it looks solidly good, but then there's times where the skin comes off as extremely rubbery or flat. So my verdict is that I'm hoping this doesn't reflect on the series to come, because while this is a technical misstep, it doesn't mean that the whole story put forth is going to be bad. So it's technically a read if you're interested in the Punisher, but if you liked the Nick Spencer run, I would say give this a couple issues to hammer out the details, so most likely after the first volume comes out, this is definitely something to pick up. Next up, spiraling out of Standoff, this is Marvel's Thunderbolts #1, written by Jim Zub, art by John Malin, and colors by Matt Yackey. Same plot as usual. Team gets together, but they aren't exactly heroes, but they don't do anything that's actually bad, especially since everyone's under Bucky's leadership while he does stuff against S.H.I.E.L.D. because they're evil. Okay, newsflash Marvel editorial. Captain America proved that he wouldn't put up with S.H.I.E.L.D.'s dickery a long time ago at this point, especially when you're coming off of Standoff, where everyone knows that S.H.I.E.L.D. is a bag of dick tips. Sorry. Anyways, this particular outcropping looks and reads like a late 90s comic. The art isn't inherently bad, but it's way too overdrawn for posing over fluidity, and the colors actually work against it if it wanted to embrace that feel. It's too crisp to work with that. But Kobik, the Cube Girl, looks good, and honestly, I may like this book. Now, I'm not saying I do, because I can probably only recommend this to people who don't mind that 90s style and flow and actually miss it, because even if you come into this as curious as I was, you won't get as much Winter Soldier as you want, you won't get baddies being good, you'll get a little sass and mostly just showing that everyone really likes Kobik for some weird reason. I would have liked to see a bit more here's why we're actually helping Bucky in this, more than just the awkward it's a living feel that everyone seems to have. But hey, the ending does make it at least a read, though I have a feeling it'll be overturned next issue really quickly, especially with the cover. So yes, it's readable if you're curious, but easily ignorable if you're not. And in time for his home invasion, we have Marvel's Deadpool Massacre #1, written by Brian Posehn and Jerry Duggan, with art by Scott Koblish, with Nick Filardi on colors. Well, it's not actually because his movie's out, but because of Cinco de Mayo, which is why this script is actually translated from English to Spanish and then back to English. The plot itself is fairly straightforward, with Massacre, a die-hard fan of Deadpool, basically just doing a standard plot of killing a leader of a cartel. The humor of this issue really comes far more with the dialogue being filtered through Google Translate a couple times, rather than any of the wacky antics or rapid-fire jokes that Deadpool has become known for. But overall, I'd actually say this was a really enjoyable read for what it was. The art is solid, the colors are great, and it's all just a fun, quick little read. I know, short and sweet, but that's how this goes. Give it a read, just don't go in expecting Deadpool to be Deadpool, or Deadpool at all. And for Star Wars Day, there's Marvel's True Believers, Star Wars Covers #1. It's an assortment of covers. Like I said, this is just an assortment of variant covers from the Marvel Star Wars properties. There's really not much to say about this. If you like variant covers, there's some great ones here, like David Acuna's variant cover for Star Wars #1 that plays homage to Amazing Spider-Man #129, with Boba Fett being the Punisher and Han Solo as Spidey, or any of the fun-filled Scotty Young covers collected within. So my verdict is that I think this is a decent grab for $1 in hard copy, but I wouldn't give it the time of day digitally since there's so many sites and ways to see these variants without needing to front any dash for it. And the last thing Marvel released this week were a couple guidebooks to the MCU films, Iron Man 3 and Thor: The Dark World. I got nothing to say on them, since they're just reference books. I mean, they'll explain who characters are, linking them to the comics and everything, but ultimately, it adds nothing to the overall mythos. I suppose if this is your cup of tea, they'll be exactly what you want them to be. So I say it's easily ignorable, unless you actively want to have reference books for these specific films. Veering away from the mainstream, we start with Avatar's Cinema Purgatorio #1, with 5 separate teams on 5 separate stories. So there's 5 separate stories in this. For a quick summary, because I've been asked to actually talk more about the stories when I do anthologies, the first is Cinema Purgatorio proper by Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill, which, well, does exactly what it says on the tin and uses an old-time picture show to, what I assume, act as purgatory and whatnot. Then we have Garth Ennis and Raulo Caceres on Code Prue, which shows the first time a new EMT meets what may be a vampire. Then we have Modded by Kieran Gillen and Ignacio Solero, which seems to be post-apocalyptic gear-worked Pokemon with demons. Yeah. A More Perfect Union by Max Brooks and Michael De Pascal is an alternate history thing, wherein Thomas Chamberlain and not his brother lead the 20th Maine Infantry. If you understand that, awesome to ya. And finally, The Vast by Christos Gage and Gabriel Andrade, where we get jets fighting giant non-Euclidean horrors from the sea. All of these stories are top-notch. While there aren't many Alan Moore stories that I do get behind, the overall style for Cinema Purgatorio really allows for writers to come out and just knock it out of the park. But really, the mid-card here shows with flying color. Enos's Code Prue has a great overall that leads to a punchline that leads into the next installment very well. But my personal favorite of all has to be Brooks's A More Perfect Union. While it's not as bombastic or out there as every other story, it holds a great soul behind it with a simple switch of which Chamberlain is leading the 20th. Plus, having a completed Gettysburg line really makes me curious about this alternative history. Yes, you can say it's a bit of a nerdy thing or what have you, but it was the most different and something that really just struck a fantastic chord with me. So this is most definitely worth the price of admittance, so go out and get it right now. Onward to IDW's Dungeons & Dragons #1, written by Jim Zub with art by Nelson Daniel. Now, I've given a lot of praise to the IDW D&D books whenever they come out, and yes, half of it does deal with my love for Minsk and Boo, but honestly, sweet Christmas, go out and get this right now. Fairly simple. Minsk and his adventuring party are tasked to protect a church against werewolves, who are seeking one of their treasures. They fail and get mist-teleported into Ravenloft. Why is this awesome? Because Ravenloft is a module that has just been truly epic and has become legendary since it first came out. But since I'm trying to keep these short, there's a Spoonie video talking about what Ravenloft is somewhere out there for his Counter Monkey stuff. But short of it, it is a great setting, and the story, at least in this part, sets up great to get them into this module, with solid characters and again, great art. It's a solid read, and if you know anything about the other D&D comics or the games, then this is a must-own. And ooh, a nice collection of things from Aftershock. Aftershocks Genesis #1, with a lot of awesome by a lot of people. This is definitely a previews comic worth getting for the amount of sheer greatness within it. First, we get a short story teasing us about what's going to happen in the new Paul Jenkins comic, Alters. Though he does say that it doesn't directly tie into the main story, but I think that after you read this parallel panel story about two boys in two separate times, you'll definitely want to read Alters. And the art for it works well for first-time Aftershock artist Steven Sadowski. Then we have something that made me literally fanboy while reading, because it's a short story, again not particularly connected to the main comic, set in the black-eyed kids world, where I think I'm starting to see a cross between the comic's Girls and The Walking Dead, though it's still very much its own entity. And yes, it's by Joe Pruitt and Simon Kudransky, so you know that it looks and reads great. Then there's, oh snap, a Mark Waid, Tom Prayer, Wilfredo Torres promo art for Captain Kidd, which basically lays out a middle-aged man wakes up as a teenage superhero, which looks and sounds like fun on a bun. Then there's Tim Seeley and Gunstorm's book, Lifespanners. From the description, it's about a company that starts augmenting people with superpowers, but while the cost is high, it may be even higher for their bodies. With the tagline being what it is, I'm going to guess that it'll be a narrative centered on an online blogger type person, but I'm highly intrigued. Then there's the one that I've been really trying to figure out how to wrangle a review copy for, The Revisionist by Frank Barbier and Gary Brown. Basically, it's about a man having to go back in time and fix the mess his father made, his father being the first-time traveler. But it's going to be harder, especially since he may have to murder and assassinate people. It looks so good and pulpy that I just can't say no to it. Then there's Volition from Ryan Parrott and Omar Francia. So a pair of unlikely robots must venture to save all of robot kind from a consciousness-erasing virus, while there's religious zealots, bounty hunters, and all sorts of things trying to stop them. Now, just seeing the art and that premise, you can tell that it's not going to be a kind of robots adventure, the Robin Williams movie Robots, not iRobot or something, although it could be iRobot-y. Anyways, it's actually going to show these two as characters, not just robots. And next up is a quick splash page from Rough Riders #2. If you need swaying on this, Harry Houdini draws a gun on Teddy Roosevelt. And also go and watch my review of Rough Riders #1. It's a damn good series so far, same as Jackpot, which the preview pages are from the first issue, and I have a video up for that awesomeness too. Wait a minute, hold the phone. Brian Azzarello is doing something for Aftershock, and I'm already 2 issues behind? Well, if you're watching this on all new first issues, hop to right after the mid-credit roll, and see how I feel about that in Flashback Firsties. Yes, this issue is simply Aftershock looking at you from across the bar going, wanna see what I bring to the party? And you know what? I'd buy that for $1. Seriously, for $1 you can see everything that Aftershock is doing right now, and if you doubt me when I say how great Aftershock's been, then check it out for yourself. Like I said, it's only $1 and amazing. Man, I'm really running out of transitions if you haven't noticed. Screw it, here's Image Comics 3 Floyds, Alpha Kings #1, written by Brian Azzarello and Nick Floyd, with art by Simon Beasley and colors by Ryan Brown. So, 3 Floyds is a brewery out of Munster, Indiana, and this is their epic origin story. A man, with the love of his life at his side, makes the finest ale in the post-apocalyptic Gabo-controlled wastes, or something like that. But since it's so good, the ruling Gabos trash his place, steal his girl, and throw him into his very own fermenting tank. But he emerges as a great white ginger orc person who shall now get his revenge. Now, I've never heard of 3 Floyds Brewery, which I suspect stems from both my region being in central New York and the rarity in which I actually drink. So, with that out of the way, I kind of really want to try their brew now. It's a very metal comic book. Yes, I'm using it as a legitimate adjective to describe this. The art style itself reminds me of the old Ed Roth Ratfink artwork, which I know means nothing to a lot of people, but for me, it's a great gritty absurdity that holds onto realism enough to be grungy badass as hell. So in short, an awesome story that I think is definitely worth a buy, and if anyone wants to send me one of their product, I'll review that too. Also from Image is Image Comics, Renato Jones, The 1% #1, written and drawn by Kyle Andrews. Well, that was a special dose of something. Well, yes, this is definitely a Punisher for the current social mindset. And that's what we see. We see the origins of the person now going by Freelancer, whose name's not actually Renato Jones, but you've got to see how the rich little piggies screw his life over to really see why he takes such a personal vendetta against them. When I first saw this cover and the tagline, I figured it was going to be a standard book skewed merely to sell to the heavy left viewpoint. But that's not this at all. While the bad guy that Freelancer goes after and the framework for his life story all point to the evils of the 1% and excess and everything like that, it's done well enough that you know the guys that he's killing are monsters and basically would be iced by the Punisher or Hitman, rather than just a vigilante targeting people with money. So it's a solid book on that front. It is a great read, and while the art is a bit loose in that indie sense, I can dig it. The design for the character is fairly nifty, and overall it is a solid read. Next we gallop to Dark Horse's Overwatch, McCree Trainhopper #1, written by Robert Brooks and art by Bengal. This is just a little comic about Jesse McCree, that kick-ass looking outlaw character from the video game Overwatch. It's a solid little tale that wraps up fast enough, and really has all the fun notions of that gunslinging genre that I enjoy. But hey, there's actually no reason not to read this, since it's free on Comixology right now. Especially if you're looking forward to the Overwatch game, or playing it right now. Then there's Valiant's 4001 AD #1, written by Matt Kint, with Clayton Crane and David Mack on art. In the distant future, Japan is a satellite orbiting Earth, controlled by a program known as Father. Yet, Father has begun to drop pieces of New Japan piece by piece back to Earth. Lula, a very Jubilee-looking chick with cool-colored hair, knows the truth though, so when her parents are evacuating, she can't put her trust in the machine, and leaves them with the hope there's still time to save them. And on Earth, Rei, the spirit guardian of New Japan, is trying to find a way back to his beloved city to stop Father. Yet when he commandeers an old busted Gundam before he can reach the city, Father transforms New Japan into a dragon! If I ran clips in the show, here's where the "It's a Transformer" Spaceballs clip would go. Just go read it. Honestly, Valiant has never been disappointing since their relaunch a couple of years ago, and my god does Rei always show it. The art is nothing short of breathtaking on every page, which usually translates to some stilted action, but not here. And the writing, while yes, this is a four-parter that does have to fill you in on what's happened beforehand, really hits home with the emotion, plot, humanity, and generally anything you'd want in a comic of this caliber. If you've been wondering about the Rei series, this is a sweet spot to jump in and see what makes Rei something special. Next, we light the fuse with Dynamite's King's Quest #1, written by Ben Acker and Heath Corson, with art by Dan McDade. King's Quest has always been a great line, teaming up the best of the odd assortment of not exactly pulp heroes, the pulp heroes would be in masks, but this is the Avengers by way of teaming up Mandrake the Magician, Flash Gordon, Prince Valiant, the Phantom, and his sidekick, the other Phantom, as they battle Ming the Merciless. Now that they've already saved the Earth from his forces, they're striking back to save their reporter friend, Dale Arden. When they land on a planet for aid, the jungle attacks them. But that's when we find out that it's Jungle Jim, who thought that they were working for Ming. Then we get an action beat or two of clearing Ming's attack force. As they meet up with other allies of Flash Gordon's, we learn that Dale Arden of Earth may be beyond saving, as she is now the Empress of Ming the Merciless. Every time a King's Quest comic comes out, it's totally worth buying hard copy. These characters are legendary in not just nerd communities, but pop culture in general, and Dynamite has always been astute at making the timeless quality of their characters shine, especially when teaming them up. However, there's also a very contemporary feel to it, and I think that's why the modern attitude of the young Phantom sidekick person, especially as narrator, really allows for a great audience proxy to follow the events. And the art, it's great to keep the pulpy feel. It's great to keep the pulpy feel without ever feeling unlike the characters. The setting is lush and alien without being distractingly so. So yes, go out and buy this right now for a fantastic read. Next, there's the oddly named Oni Press's Space Battle Lunchtime #1, written by Natalie Race and designed by Hilary Thompson. An Earth girl named Peony is abducted from her bakery to be a contestant on Space Battle Lunchtime, in which 6 intergalactic cooks meet at Kitchen Space Stadium to find out who will be the Platinum Chef. Hey, I think making the Iron Chef references is more universal than Cutthroat Kitchen or Chopped, or Master Chef or Top Chef. But yeah, that's basically the setup. Now, when it comes to a cooking show comic book, there's going to be skepticism. But this issue is all about getting Peony to the competition and setting up the players and the contest, so there's not a lot to say about how they handle the cooking portion. But the lead-in with the character sets up very well, and the art, which is fun, cartoony style, works well for the characters and the setting, especially when it comes to making the aliens palatable. And personally, if this ever becomes a cartoon series, Alton Brown needs to be the host, Zorp the Octahedral. So this is a surprisingly solid book that you should totally check out. Next is the highly anticipated Boom Studios Weavers #1, written by Simon Spurrier, illustrated by Dylan Burnett, and colors by Triona Farrell. So the Weavers are an old-school organized crime empire. You know, not quite the mob. But unlike the regular kind, this is special, as the Weavers seem to be able to go Akira with their bodies. For those who don't grasp that, the character Kaneda in the cult film Akira... No, you know what? Go watch the film to get the reference. Anyways, cut to Sid Times, who's the new boy in the gang, but he's hesitant to use the Shoggoth in his arm and embrace the bug inside him. Which does lead to some thinking he may be a cop, but instead of playing the Departed Home game, they give him another chance. The social media saturation for this was huge. I mean, granted it could be because I follow Boom Studio and a lot of other comic people, but honestly, it got me really intrigued for this. And it didn't disappoint. The very paranormal mob premise works great to keep a mystery to it that exceeds most regular crime books. And the art adds that mystique as well, with a normal, though rough, model for each character really working well to contrast when the unnatural elements are present. So, there's a lot of great things in this, so go out and check it out right now. And finally, Benitez Productions, Lady Mechanika, The Lost Boys of West Abbey #1, written by M.M. Chen, art by Joe Benitez and Martin Montiel, with colors by Peter Steigerwald. Lady Mechanika is a series that has been on my radar for some time now, but not something that I've actively gone looking for, and I feel really bad about not having checked this out sooner. The plot to this is that orphan boys in Mechanika City, which is basically steam-powered Victorian London, have been murdered and found strapped to tables and other mad science-y laboratory-looking places, but the bodies were found next to mechanical dolls. And Lady Mechanika and her team are on the case, aided by an oddly supportive Inspector Singh. First off, I want to say that this is so refreshing to see a steampunk piece that gives itself a universe to play with rather than strictly being set in London. It opens up a unique world that can have its own foibles and rules that just allow for something to breathe and get really fleshed out. Now, this isn't the first Lady Mechanika book, but it is a great read if you are a newcomer. The art is crisp and tight with that perfect feel to the world, and the characters themselves look fantastic for the genre. And the writing on this is spectacular, with each person having a distinct voice, and the plot drawing me in to see what the next issue holds, particularly with Lady Mechanika getting flashes of her own past. So it's not like we don't know any of this going in. Anyways, it's a total buy to get this now. And that's a full lid, everyone. Unfortunately, I'm not going to have an after the ad break section on this. However, Flashback Firsty for American Monsters will be posted sometime this week. If you come here for Manga Firsty, check out my good friend Harmonica J's written review of My Hero Academia. In the description, there's a link to that. It's on Badly Productions. Check out the website. And for Webcomic Firsty, I will let you guys know about that next week. Don't forget, like, subscribe. I am on Twitter as well. You can see all my Twitter, Facebook, everything in the description below. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up and share us around. If you agree or disagree, leave comments. I respond to them all as best as I can. Now, I'm the Archivist, and I really need to pass out. See you later, Inklings.